Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, I was on another podcast getting interviewed and I was posed the question, what is something that you believe that you know is true, but the rest of society has not figured out yet? And my answer to this on a pure gut level was social media is net more evil than it is beneficial. I get the benefits of it. I use it for my business. On LinkedIn, we reach out to other business owners. We help transform their lives. Awesome. But on the net, I believe that it's much more negative because of its incentivization package primarily. And I think that it's anti-relationship when you really dive down to it, whether we're talking about Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, any of the ones where people are posting comments and their own content. I think at the end of the day, because the way it presently is made, maybe it'll always be this way, maybe it's intentionally this way. I don't even know. But with the algorithm incentivizing people based upon likes and trying to have as many followers or friends, depending on what platform it is, the call to hospitality, humility, kindness is all out the window. And all of these platforms essentially reward extremism. And because it's an information platform, it's a perpetual race to be first, which is also a never-ending race, which has to be exhausting, which is a side point. So I wanted to point that out there because, I wanted to see your thoughts on it. Obviously, you live in the same world I do. Social media is a thing. It's around us whether we want it to be or not. And I know that I can't be the only person who's ever had thoughts or questions come at you about, wow, this is it's a giant time suck, and I don't think it's actually good for us. So I wanted to bring that question to her because I know that I'm not the only person who feels this.
Yeah, how would you define social media? Like, what would you include in that?
I guess basically anything where you comment and or create the content. So I comment on other people's stuff and I create the content. So whether that be putting up videos, so I guess YouTube's included in this too, whether I put up videos or pictures, and it's basically meant for me to get publicity as the producer of the content. That's how I would define it. So, there's obviously, it's not the whole internet. I'm not trying to say it's that, but it's basically, it's the major ones. It's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I guess YouTube. I can never really consider that one off the top of my head, but TikTok certainly, where people are just trying to get attention. And again, I'm not even totally denigrating this. I do ads on them, like I use them as a business source, but I just feel like overall it's not that profitable, and I'm caught in this weird personal business dilemma because on the one hand, I'm profiting from something I don't think is good, but on the other hand, am I even right? You know what I mean? Like certainly you're connecting with people we haven't seen. That might be positive, but I just think the net of it is not. So anyway, that's my idea. That was the long answer.
What about podcasting? You include podcasting?
No, because there's the reason I don't include podcasts because there's no interaction back from the audience. As much as I want there to be, please send us your emails about what you want to talk about, but there's not a direct, I can get angry at a podcast and I can fire out in a public setting. Like if you respond to a podcaster, 9 times out of 10, if not always, it's in a private, intimate, not intimate, but non-public answer. So I can't get mad at you and have a public way of saying, oh, I hate what Father said in that last episode. Now I can make a big hoopla like you could on Twitter. Granted, that's why I think podcasting and Twitter is different. I guess that's my answer, is where it's always public. It's a race, all of those elements. So, yeah.
So YouTube without the likes and comment boxes is different than with the likes and comment boxes. One likes and comment boxes make it social media. Otherwise, it's just content distribution.
Yeah, in my head, yeah, because it basically, if you take the likes and comments out of YouTube, it's just a library of videos. Like, that's how I would look at it. And it's like, some people are in the library, some people aren't. But because there's likes and comments going back and forth, and YouTube's probably the weakest of all of them. This mostly is about Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, and Instagram. But that's how I view it. Yeah, and that might be the wrong way of looking at it. Maybe I'm too narrow. Maybe I'm too broad. I don't know. But that's just.
And then you're evaluating good and bad based on what metric?
Society outcome. I guess that's really super broad, but fundamentally, I think that the concept of networks for bringing people together is a really weak, unsatisfying, and poor substitute for making actual relationships. Like the virtual community I have, and I get that there's some people who thrive there, but overall, I see it being way less fulfilling and satisfying having an Instagram following versus having a couple of core friends that you can go out and talk to and be real with. And that's what I'm trying to. I think that's the crux of why I think it's not net positive. But yeah. So you're
trying to construct I'm trying to construct the experiment that you are anticipating a result from. I mean, you're forming a hypothesis around a claim. To form a hypothesis, you need a measurement. So what does good and bad mean? How do you measure that? Yeah. So you're talking about that in terms of satisfaction, social cohesion. So what measurement do you have in mind is one question, but what measurement should you have in mind is another question. Maybe we should measure these things around the development of virtue and holiness. Those would be Christian measurements that are the ones that matter in the long run. We can have, of course, proximate measurements rather than ultimate measurements. And that's where, driving profitability. I mean, I presume that's why you're in the space, is because ultimately you can invest a certain amount of time and you get a certain amount of profit out of it. So you're measuring it on a return on investment, where investment is mostly time and some little bit of money, and but time and effort, I suppose, are the main things.
That's right.
So you're measuring it based on that kind of capital. Another measurement would be something like we've talked about the book. It's probably superseded by other more important thing or more other things now, but Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. So he's measuring focus, for example. So is this increasing focus or decreasing focus? That would be another way of approximating its value for the sake of human flourishing. If it's about, again, real social cohesion, but it's like, what's the value of social cohesion? How do you actually measure that? Well, maybe in terms of well-being, how I would rate well-being on a scale of 1 to 10 or something like that. And maybe I could measure that. If it's about getting more information, are people more informed? Because are the people who are on Twitter more informed? Or are the people who are on Twitter more angry and frustrated? Or are the people who are on Twitter more entertained and interested? Is it raising depression levels or lowering depression levels? And can you correlate that with use? So
that was, I guess that's what I'm trying to get to, is because so a couple of things brought there, like social cohesion, like, is there value to that? Absolutely, there's value to that. Every single group I'm in or team I'm in, the better connected they are, the better the results have been. I've never experienced a football team where the right tackle and the right guard will not listen to each other and think your quarterback's not going to get sacked. You have to be on the same page, whether it be because we all agree each other. You might not let the play that's called, but you still agree with it. You know what it is. You're going to act accordingly. And just from social demeanor, I feel like that is going away. This all starts from articles I've read and personal observations, but there is a divide between people who don't know how to talk to each other without their phone and those that do. And that's what I mean by social decorum and social norms. I understand that obviously we're talking through the power of the internet. I get to see your face and the audience gets to hear us. But still, this at least is an interaction. It's not me, just saying, oh, I saw something you posted and now I'm going to be angry at you to try to get a reaction. I guess that's the difference.
That seems to be the thing that you're particularly focused on, is the kind of angry reactions and the negative chatter. And
I think it redirects people's mindsets incorrectly, in that, for what? Since 2017, we've been talking about the power of having meaningful, important relationships. But if your whole goal is to just increase the number of whatever metric you're on, likes, follows, retweets, whatever, and that is not ever corollary or even in the same direction as developing deep, meaningful relationships. I get that there's always going to be exceptions. There are some people that use these platforms different. But I'm talking about the way the algorithm is trying to drive people, and the way that most people are playing the social networking games is I want to get fame, I want to get prestige, I want to be famous for being famous type thing. And all of that is, I believe, incredibly not beneficial for the individuals partaking in it, both the creators of the content and those rapidly following and just mindlessly scrolling through their feeds. As you said, in an attention deficit world, that used to be like the number one topic and prescribed problem in the 90s. And now it's just, oh, that's normal. Like, just scroll on your phone. It's expected. And I just think of this as like the direction that society is going because of this.
So let's maybe explore some other. Let's explore some frameworks for how this could fit together. So this is not a problem for me. So why is this not a problem for me? Well, because I have a stable framework of relationships. If I think of, I don't know, Jordan Peterson, I don't think he's trying to drive likes and views in this way. Or Matt Fradd, who's a friend of mine and has, whatever million subscribers or whatever it is on Pines of the Aquinas. I know his network of real relationships. I know the relationships he develops with his guests, and I know the attention that he pays to his audience without getting pulled apart by it or whatever. So why is it possible for some to handle this fine, and you too, I'm sure. I don't know what you're like when you're in front of social media, but I know what you're like this way, and you have a lot of stability.
Unless it's business, I guess that's my answer. It's like, I
thought. So it has the potential to take people in bad directions. That's clear. And I think you're claiming that it more often takes people in bad directions. But is that necessarily, I mean, gambling would do the same thing. So gambling, the algorithm around gambling, for example, is to drive people in bad directions because the house wants to make a profit. But it doesn't require people to go in bad directions. So currently our society has decided that it's better to have gambling than not, and it's legalized in a lot of places. And, I think that raises certain questions, but the point is, how do we foster the kinds of, virtue, or how do we identify the people who are going to be misled by social media? How do we provide a remedy for bad use? Or is that even possible? That's a fair question. Is there and how much of that is because it's new also? It's a new challenge that doesn't have the kind of cultural standards and expectations around it from, learning from bad experience. I think we're better off that way. It's like everybody knows if you're doing social media up to the point that you're trying to fall asleep, or if you're on your phone in bed at midnight, We can call that bad sleep hygiene or bad phone hygiene or whatever. And I think there's a broader sense of that now. And there are scientific studies that correlate certain kinds of behaviors with certain kinds of problems. And so, that's becoming a more of a cultural standard. So I think some of those things are happening. I can't deny. So to make a comparison about better or worse, it's like, how many people's lives have been changed by Jordan Peterson, for example, who would not exist without social media? I mean, and the algorithms drove millions, literally millions of people to watch his stuff, many of whom are young men who have been worked out of depression by the fact that they watched his stuff. They decided to take up a burden, to set their aim, and to start walking in a direction. And their lives have been radically changed, and society has been significantly improved. And I'm a little closer to Matt Fradd, and he, just from being on, I've only been on his show like 3 times, and the number of people who have seen me on it and whose lives have been changed by that conversation, or more broadly by him and his guests, is really significant. Mm-hmm. So, how do you measure that against the opposite problem? People are not all watching Jordan Peterson and Matt Fradd. They're also watching a lot of nonsense and getting caught up in other whirlpools that are a race to the bottom. Mm-hmm. How do you balance those things? How do you purify out the negative effects and maximize the positive effects? I think those are all interesting questions, but I'm not sure. Well, I sort of wonder. I mean, kind of the claim of Johan Hari and Stolen Focus is what you're saying, that the medium is inherently problematic unless there are legal or social pressures to change the algorithms to protect the innocent, who are maybe don't have the capacity to make better decisions for themselves. And so things like infinite scroll and, well, what they did in TikTok, you've been watching this for 20 minutes. Do you really want to continue? And inserting decision points, question points. Are there some of those things that we can insert into this? Or, maybe your belief is, and maybe it's justifiable, is that it's all just fundamentally broken and it'll never be a net gain. And we'd be better off, for the sake of the human race, abandoning it, even though there are many positive dimensions as well. They're not worth the problems.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's never going to be possible. I mean, a lot of my life is looking at incentive structures, because I think that's what would drive people more than anything else. And yeah, you can argue that capitalism, there's lots of ways you can have negative incentives, and like the mafia does this all the time. They make money all the time. Their entire business is to make money, and they do it in a lot of horrible ways. And then there's lots of businesses do great things, making the world difference. And there's net more of them, lifting people out of, giving them employment, and the products are awesome and all that. So I don't think that anything intrinsically has to be evil. I'm just saying the way that it's used, particularly looking at the fact that most people on Twitter are, I guess this is just looking at the statistics. You and I both grew up before this was a thing. And if you look at the generations or individuals, I mean, it is a generation now, that have had smartphones and social media from the time they were in 6th grade, their relationship building abilities are through the floor. They're astronomically poor, and it's causing a lot of by problems that are like things that used to be for the generations above would be. And I know it's turned into like the young kids don't know anything, but this is a fact, is that measurably there's less problem solving, there's less cohesion, there's less being willing to forgive. All metrics as a result of, I don't get attention by saying a nice thing. I get attention by being
angry. I wonder how directly you can correlate any of that to that one factor. I think
I don't know if it's correlatable or not.
Like, let's correlate that with divorce.
Yeah, it could be. Listen, I don't know. These could all be things that are just going on at the same time, but it's
let's correlate that with the increase in acceptability of same-sex relationships. Let's correlate that with the reduced attendance at mass. Let's correlate that. So I'd be interested to know where the real correlating factors are in some of those
just might be taking a temperature and blaming the wrong thing. You're totally fair on that. Yeah, sorry.
But no, it's a good discussion, I think. And I actually appreciate the chance. I'm obviously in the position of I put you on the stand to have this conversation, but I hope that that's instructive for people. I think the tendency, and I do the same thing. You just happen to be the one that was leading the conversation this time. So I'm not holding myself above that, but I try to hold myself accountable to the kinds of conclusions I'm making, pay attention to the metrics I'm using, and figure out what the data is that I'm basing this on. And I try to, I don't know, Jordan Peterson's an inspiration for me in that. He really tries to attack conclusions and avoid generalizations. And he says your enemy is your friend because your enemy helps you to avoid making the wrong decision by testing your conclusions and forcing you to justify them and refine them so that they're right. So he prevents you from going down the wrong path in a way. And so I think those are really fruitful things for us to keep doing. I think the tendency seems to be just find the people that agree with you and everybody agree with each other, and then we don't really get closer to the truth, and so we don't really get closer to a solution to some of these problems. So anyway, I think kind of the method, if I can step away from our conversation for a moment and the content about social media and say, what's the method for exploring this question? I think that's a pretty useful thing to have demonstrated by our conversation today.
Yeah, and I hope that this conversation was beneficial for everyone who listened to it. Just to, again, not trying to tell people how to think or what to do, but just to contemplate it. Sit back and go, is this worth it? Is the time I'm putting into it beneficial? Or would it be better if I consciously did something else? So just a thought, just putting out there. And like I said, I could be completely wrong on the cause. You get a very good example of divorce, all the other things you mentioned there. I think I'm just taking a temperature. And like any other time you take a temperature, it can be different tomorrow. But that's just how it feels right now. And like I said, I have this platform. I have you here, Father. I wanted to discuss that. So I thank you very much for having the conversation with us, and then everyone for listening. So we'll be with you again next week, and we'll go from there.